Bunnie Toy sat frowning, staring down at her shoes. She had wanted the calf-high boots with 3-inch heels. At 4 feet 2 inches and 55 pounds, she was the smallest in her class and hoped the boots would add some height. Her foster mother, however, insisted on patent leather Mary Janes and white ruffle socks, outfits that would have made her look like a toddler. As a compromise, she was stuck with ballet flats adorned with a bow. Her foster mother also insisted on plum leggings, a black pleated skirt, and a green blouse. After all, a girl should look presentable on her first day at a new school. You couldn't last a single day, could you? Steele asked from across the room. They sat in leather armchairs before a large wooden desk. Bookshelves filled the walls, except for a giant TV tuned to Nickelodeon. Plush carpeting and heavy drapes gave the room a refined feel. Each kid had a juice box untouched beside them. Bunnie shot Steele a glare. Like her, he was in 5th grade. Unlike her, Steele's trust fund paid for private school, while her foster parents shopped at Walmart and sent her to public school. She resented his perfectly styled blonde hair, his branded polo shirt and jeans, and his Italian leather loafers. Mostly, she blamed herself. "I was just experimenting," she muttered, shrugging. "Experimenting? You hypnotized half your class into swapping clothes with the other half." "It was a study on gender role reversal," Bunnie said with a sigh. "Relevant to our situation." "Sure," Steele said. "Then why were the other kids half naked?" "Control group," she said, raising her hands as if it were obvious. She brushed a stray bang from her eyes and crossed her arms, clearly annoyed. "You're lucky your foster mom got the call, not the police," Steele said. "Yeah, real lucky," Bunnie snorted. Everything grated on her, the outfit, her skinny arms, the messy hair. But mostly, the fact she was here, dependent on others. Well, her hair wasn't so bad. Thick, shiny black, just unruly. Short only because 6 months ago she'd been a 62-year-old scientist named Richard Wilder. "That woman's out to get me," Bunnie snapped. "She's trying to teach you how to be a proper young lady. She paid someone to pierce my ears with steel spikes." "Those are earrings," Steele rolled his eyes. "Normal for girls your age." "It hurt," Bunnie pouted. Steele glanced at her with a mix of sympathy and annoyance. His mannerisms were a bit effeminate too, partly because he was still a kid, but mostly because 6 months ago he'd been Richard Wilder's wife, Dr. Miriam Jackson Wilder. "Look, Bunnie," Steele said, tired, "I don't like this any more than you do, but until this is fixed, we have to act normal." Bunnie just scowled. "At least promise me you won't experiment on your classmates again," Steele sighed. "Maybe," Bunnie said cautiously, "if I can have the Theta Wave parabolic sensor." "What for?" "I have observations to make." "Fine. You can have it, if you swear off experimenting on classmates." Bunnie scrunched her face, silent for a moment. "Well," Steele pressed. "Fine," she relented. "Fine what?" "Fine, I promise not to experiment on classmates," she said, throwing up her hands. "All right," Steele nodded. "You get it. But if you break that promise..." "Who, me?" Bunnie said, batting her eyes, knowing full well her promise didn't cover anyone outside her class. Jared Anderson slouched at his desk before biology class, clearly bored as students filtered in and noisily took their seats. He hated biology, actually, he disliked most of his classes. All he cared about was football, playing hard and dominating the competition. At 6 feet 4 inches and with a powerful arm that could launch the ball 60 yards and knock down runners, Jared was practically untouchable when it came to school discipline. He enjoyed high school life and his place near the top of the social ladder. This gave him a strong confidence, leaving him puzzled by any sudden shifts in social dynamics. "Hello, I'm Ms. Toy," Bunnie announced, stepping in front of the class. "I'll be your substitute teacher today." Jared couldn't believe it was real. Despite wearing an adult-style jacket and skirt with nylons and heels, Bunnie was obviously just an elementary school kid. Your regular teacher, Mrs. Halverson, asked me to demonstrate Theta Wave Asymmetric Transference, Bunnie said, writing T.W.A.T on the dry erase board, which triggered giggles across the room. She ignored them and set up a device on the teacher's desk, then faced the class again. I'll need a volunteer to serve as a test subject, she said, locking eyes on Jared. She squealed lightly and hurried over to him, feeling his biceps. Yes. You'll be perfect, she said with a strange smile. Bunnie almost skipped back to the desk, but her shoes held her back. She clasped her hands excitedly near her face and squealed again as she returned to the apparatus. Hold still while I focus this, or we might not be able to switch, she said, adjusting knobs and dials as she aimed the device at Jared. Jared watched, confused, as Bunnie placed a metal ring around her head and connected wires from the ring to the machine. Ready? She asked. There might be some disorientation from the height difference. The heels help. Try walking on your toes. And record how you feel, remember, it's for science. She pulled the trigger, and the device began to hum and vibrate. Jared felt dizzy, momentarily seeing himself from across the room. Then loud pops and crackling noises filled the air, along with the smell of something burning. Crap! Bunnie shouted, frantically hitting the machine. Crap! 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 Jared shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts as Bunnie struggled to shut the device off. Smoke poured out, and it was clear she'd burned her fingers trying to stop it. The fire alarm blared as flames started licking from the top. Jared stood up with the rest of the class. No! Bunnie cried out. Don't leave. I can fix this. Jared had enough. He didn't know this strange girl, but he wanted no part of her chaos. The fire alarm was a perfect excuse to skip class. As he rushed out, the last thing he saw was Bunnie frantically beating the flames with her jacket. Bunnie sat in the booster seat of her foster mother's car, her hair slightly singed and her face, arms, and clothes covered in soot. Her nylons were ripped in several places, and she'd somehow lost her shoes along the way. But tightly wrapped in her jacket and resting on her lap were the burnt remains of the T.W.A.T device, which she clung to possessively. A fire, Bunnie? Really? Her foster mother asked. The school wasn't enough trouble, you had to get the fire department involved too? Relax, Deborah, Bunnie replied. It was an accident. Don't tell me to relax, Deborah, her foster mother snapped. Do you know how much trouble you're in, young lady? Bunnie shrugged and tuned out. She cared more about the T.W.A.T device than her foster mother's scolding. It should have worked. Sure, she might have double-checked the power leads or added an interrupter switch, but she'd been so close. That big, muscular boy's body almost felt hers. She sighed, longing to be a high school boy again instead of stuck in this little girl's body. Maybe if she recharged the core, she could retrieve the boy's memories again. I'm definitely talking to that lawyer again, Deborah muttered. I don't get paid enough for this. What exactly were you doing at that high school? Experimenting, Bunnie said, beginning to clean and dismantle the T.W.A.T device. The next morning, Jared felt bleary-eyed as he made his way to school. Sleep had eluded him, haunted by vivid nightmares of a looming threat chasing him all night. The unsettling dreams left him anxious and on edge. He worried about his mental state. Football practice was that afternoon, and he hoped he could remember and execute the plays. Since the dreams, he'd been overwhelmed by a strange mix of anxiety and gloom. This wasn't like him. Jared, what's up? Theo, my man. Jared greeted his top wide receiver, but something about Theo seemed different. He looked good. Crazy stuff yesterday, Theo said. I heard terrorists started that fire. What? Jared asked, distracted by Theo's broad shoulders and large hands. The fire, man, remember? Oh, yeah. Just some chick messing around, Jared replied, noticing for the first time Theo's deep-set eyes and sharp jawline. For real? Still, pretty crazy. Yeah, Jared said nervously, shifting his weight and avoiding eye contact. He absent-mindedly reached behind his ear, feeling like something was missing. You okay, man? Theo asked. Yeah, just tired, Jared answered, hating how often he said yeah. He worried Theo thought he was an idiot. Be ready for practice or coach will have both our asses, Theo warned. Later, man. Later, Jared said, shaking his head to clear his thoughts as he watched Theo walk away. What's wrong with me? He muttered. Jared hoped the strange feelings would fade before practice, but they only deepened. He felt moody and withdrawn all day, torn between wanting attention and wanting to disappear. Worst of all were the unexpected girly feelings. He even caught himself checking out some guys in class. Once, he imagined wearing a bra and felt the straps on his shoulders as if they were real. Changing for football practice was nerve-wracking. He feared an embarrassing moment but managed to suit up without incident. Maybe I'm shaking this off, he thought as he ran onto the field, and then everything went black. Jared woke up staggering, grabbing a clothing rack for support. Something was wrong. He was inside, surrounded by racks of clothes. This was the mall. What happened to football practice? Jared glanced at his wristwatch and froze. A small, slender watch hugged a thin wrist, his thin wrist. He stared at his hands in disbelief. His fingers were too narrow, tipped with long, chipped black nail polish. How was he supposed to throw a football with hands like these? His clothes felt strange. Black and white hair fell over one side of his face, distracting him. Brushing it aside, he looked down at his outfit. The scuffed red Reeboks were the most normal thing he wore. The semi-sheer black leggings and short white skirt stood out as odd. Over a red t-shirt, he had a gray hoodie with pink drawstrings. What the hell, he muttered, stopping to touch his throat, surprised at the high pitch of his voice. Panic crept in as he ran his hands over his hair, torso, hips, and thighs, his fingers telling him something he struggled to accept. Spotting a three-way mirror near the changing rooms, he hurried over, his body moving awkwardly. The girl staring back at him was unfamiliar. She was young and very thin, with long hair in front and short in back. Mostly black, it looked dyed, with white and pink streaks framing her face. The hair covered one eye. Her green eyes were heavily lined with black makeup. She wore thick makeup and bright red lipstick. Piercings adorned her lip, nose, eyebrow, and multiple earrings on her visible ear. No freaking way! Jared said, hearing that unfamiliar voice echo his shock as the girl in the mirror mimicked every move. Bunnie had the T.W.A.T device partially taken apart on her workbench. She stared down the aiming barrel while flicking the trigger with one hand. The drive capacitor had come loose, she'd been sure the bubble gum would hold it, but the heat had melted the gum's grip. Maybe removing the lower safety shield would let her fit a bigger capacitor, giving it more power. Bunnie! What? She called out, just as the device fired, sending a beam of energy behind her head and singeing her hair. Supper's ready, Deborah called. I'm busy, Bunnie shouted back. She eyed the scorch mark on the wall and sniffed suspiciously. What's for dinner? She yelled. Smells like burnt hair. Chicken fingers and fries, Deborah answered. Bunnie thought for a moment. She could always finish the T.W.A.T later, nothing said it had to be today. I'll be right there, she called, slapping the housing loosely back in place and brushing the loose parts into a drawer. She hurried out, leaving the device blinking green lights on the workbench. Jared stood near the bleachers, watching the football team practice. She kept to herself easily, few paid attention to the skinny freshman emo girl. Jared Anderson, she whispered, watching the star quarterback run passing drills. The school buzzed over Jared's breakdown on the field and his week off. There were guest speakers and stress sessions, but no one noticed that Jenny Keller had been acting just as strange. Jared wondered if that was Jenny in his old body, or if it was her old body. She shook her head. It wasn't fair. No one understood her pain. Her entire identity had been upended, while shallow classmates admired what was lost, leaving her isolated. Couldn't they see the hypocrisy? The new Jared seemed fine. Jared sighed, slinging a Hello Kitty backpack over her shoulders as she left the field. She had been Jenny Keller all week, and now feared she might be her forever. Over the days, her reactions to boys made her realize she might be more girl than she wanted to admit. One hopeful sign was that she'd started having boy thoughts today. At first, she tried to suppress them, thinking they were just thoughts about boys. But as the day went on, she realized she was thinking like a boy again. That was why she was lurking near practice, hoping proximity might spark more memories and maybe switch them back. Nothing, or maybe worse than nothing. Watching the young, healthy boys sweating on the field stirred memories that felt more Jenny's than Jared's. She moved through the day weighed down by sadness. As Jared, she dreamed of a pro football career. College scouts had already shown interest, the future had been bright. It still was, but for someone else. What future did Jenny have? Jared had never thought much about women's career options. All she pictured were jobs like nurse, waitress, or secretary. Then there was wife and mother, but those thoughts left a bitter taste. Maybe she could switch electives to a business focus. Join the right clubs, volunteer to pad her resume, boost her grades enough for a scholarship at a good school, maybe even an Ivy League. Then law school, landing a starter job at a blue-chip firm. Before long, she'd be on management track, married with a trophy wife, 2.5 kids, and a mistress on the side. Jared froze. Where had that thought come from? Bunnie stared at the T.W.A.T device, eyes fixed for nearly 20 minutes without moving. It was mostly reassembled, though a few spare parts lay nearby, not important, she was sure. But it still wasn't working right. She tried recalibrating the acquisition matrix, but it wouldn't reload. Maybe purging the primary receptor and rerouting the acquisition into the receptor feed, then cranking up the gain that could refocus it on a new target. It just might work. She spent hours tweaking the device before finally raising the T.W.A.T in triumph. Success! Of course, a trial run was necessary. Bunnie carried it from the lab and set it carefully in the hall, aimed at her foster mother sitting in the recliner. The TV's noise masked the faint clicks of mechanical parts snapping into place. She pulled the trigger. Nothing. Right, she thought, then increased the gain and fired again. The TV signal immediately cut out. What the? Deborah muttered, futilely clicking the remote. Bunnie! Are you experimenting again? Deborah spun around to see Bunnie standing beside the device, clad in a long white lab coat, oversized gloves, and safety goggles. No? Bunnie replied. Jared Anderson pulled his Audi into the student parking lot and stepped out. He quickly fixed his hair and lit a cigarette before heading toward class. Life was good. Sure, he wasn't Jared Anderson, star quarterback, anymore, not even a senior. But he was male. And, he thought with a smirk beneath his Ray-Bans, devilishly good-looking. He wasn't sure how it happened, but 2 days ago, he'd gone to sleep as Jenny Keller, loser, freshman emo girl, and woken up as Gordon LaCroix, Jr. on a business track aiming for law school and a management role in his father's company. And rich. This was great, maybe even better than football. As an athlete, he had a slim chance at a brief pro career. As the son of a wealthy man and a future lawyer, he had money that kept flowing. And attention from girls. He was beginning to realize Gordon LaCroix got more action than the star quarterback ever did. Yes, life was good. His thoughts were cut short by a tug on his arm. Half-turned, he looked down to see Jenny Keller's face, her voice edged with warning. We need to talk, Gordon. Bunnie rummaged through her junk drawer searching for a Class II capacitor. She had an idea for a morphic adaptation unit that could respond to latent memories. Such a device would allow someone to trigger physical changes matching the mindset of the user. If it worked, she could create a male version of herself using only her memories. To do that, she needed some kind of analog thought capture device and hoped to find enough parts to build one from scratch. She could ask Steele for funding to hire someone to build it, but then he'd drone on about waiting for the trust fund to mature and how experimenting on people was wrong. No way was she waiting 8 years. By then, she'd be a short woman with big chests, and she definitely didn't want that. She wanted Steele to be the short woman with big chests. She was supposed to be the tall man with a large, well, you know. Unfortunately, an unavoidable event had swapped their matrices, turning his wife Miriam into Steele Strongshaft, while he was stuck as Bunnie Toy. Sighing, Bunnie sat back at her workbench and brushed her bangs from her eyes. Nothing ever seemed fair. Why did things always go wrong? Her gaze landed on the half-reassembled T.W.A.T device. Oh yeah, she'd forgotten about that one. Theta Wave Asymmetric Transference, that was brilliant. And it had almost worked. She thought about that tall, muscular football player. Being him would have been amazing. Holding the T.W.A.T device behind her ear like a phone and extending her other arm as if to throw a pass, she quickly discovered how awkward it was in her tiny hands. It slipped and crashed to the floor. "Oh, pooh," she muttered, picking it up. Not too bad, she thought. She could fix it. The more she tinkered, the more she liked the idea of trying again with that football player. Morphic adaptation was a dumb idea anyway, it'd have to be the size of a phone booth to work. And what kind of acronym was MAU? Sounded like a cat's meow. A wicked grin spread across her face as she slapped together some quick fixes and reassembled the T.W.A.T. Clearly, more experiments were in order. "Here, kitty, kitty, kitty," she murmured, carrying the device as she prowled through the house. Jared hesitated nervously at the school entrance, glancing over his shoulder for any sign of Jenny Keller. He'd been living as Gordon LaCroix for over a month now, and was determined to keep it that way. If that meant leaving the real Gordon stuck as a whiny, depressing girl, so be it. It hadn't been easy. The school wasn't that big. He'd asked his new parents about transferring to a private school, but they were surprised by his sudden change of heart. That made him back off. He didn't want them suspecting he was anything but their son, Gordon. Besides, a transfer wasn't possible until the school year ended, meaning at least 4 more months of avoiding Gordon/Jenny. "Hey, Gordon." Jared jumped at the voice, relaxing when he saw it was Julie Morgan. Though just a sophomore, she was one of the hottest girls in school. He'd noticed her even before the change. "A little jumpy?" she teased with a smile. "Nah, I'm good," he replied, visibly easing. Girls were a clear perk of being Gordon LaCroix. They flocked to him, not just because he was handsome and wealthy, but because their rivalry kept girls like Jenny Keller away. He'd even heard about a fistfight between one of them and Jenny when the younger girl wouldn't back down. As much as he enjoyed a good catfight, Jared was glad to be far from that mess. He just wished the old Gordon would stop stalking him and get used to being a girl. Maybe she'd find a boyfriend and leave him alone. "Good," Julie said. "Hey, are you going to Tyler's party?" "Tyler?" "You know, Tyler Martin, football team? His parents are out of town this weekend, so he's throwing a party." "You coming?" Of course he was. Tyler's parties were legendary. As Jared, he knew Tyler, though he doubted Gordon did. He'd have to find a way in, the football team would be there, and he wanted to see Jared and find out how he was doing since the breakdown. He had to tread carefully, but he hoped to confirm if it was really Jenny in his old quarterback's body. "Wouldn't miss it," he said. "Bringing anyone?" Julie asked. Jared smiled. She was clearly angling for an invite. Going with a sophomore was a step down, but she was smoking hot. He admired her low-slung capris and tight pink crop top. She was dressed to impress, and it was working. Why not? He'd always liked blondes. Just as he was about to answer, dizziness hit. When he looked at Julie again, his appreciation shifted to amusement. Could she be any more obvious? flapping her assets just to get invited to the shallow social event of the season, a football party. Pathetic. She didn't like him for him, she liked him for daddy's money. What a fake. Even her dyed hair was uninspired. And that makeup, he could think of a dozen better shades than the cookie-cutter look from the latest 17 magazine. The color drained from Jared's face as he realized what he was thinking. Girl thoughts. You okay? Julie asked, touching his arm. Jared flinched and scanned desperately for Jenny. I have to get out of here, he stammered, panic creeping into his voice. What? Wait. Why? Don't go! Julie called after him. But Jared was already striding toward the parking lot. He needed to get away fast. He wasn't going back to being Jenny Keller, not if he could help it. He planned to get in his car and put as much distance as possible between himself and this nightmare. As he walked, an odd sensation nagged at him. After a few steps, he realized it was the absence of the bounce on his chest. Panic surged, making him run. By the time he reached his car, he was hyperventilating, fumbling frantically for his keys. I'm not Jenny Keller, I'm not Jenny Keller, I am not Jenny Keller, he repeated frantically as he fumbled to open the car door and slide inside. No sooner had he closed the door and reached for the ignition than a harsh coughing fit overtook him, smoke pouring from his mouth. When he finally caught his breath and his eyes stopped watering, he realized he wasn't in his car at all. Instead, he was sitting on the steps near the school's back entrance by the soccer field. You gonna bogart that? A voice asked. Jared turned to see a tall, skinny boy dressed entirely in black, jeans, t-shirt, and trench coat, with black hair, eye makeup, and a studded dog collar around his neck. He was gesturing at Jared's hand. Looking down, Jared noticed what he thought was a car key was actually a hand-rolled cigarette. Even more unsettling, he was wearing a short fishnet fingerless glove, and his nails were long, painted dark purple. Wordlessly, he passed the joint to the boy, who took a practice drag before handing it to a short girl dressed in black and red. 3 other kids, all mostly in black, were gathered there. The goth crowd. He knew where they hung out, even if not their names, the back steps near the soccer field. And here he was, sitting among them, smoking a joint. Glancing down, Jared wasn't surprised to find he was a girl again. A goth girl, wearing clunky black boots with purple laces, ripped fishnet stockings, a black puffy knee-length skirt cinched with a purple belt, and a dark purple t-shirt. Long, straight black hair with purple highlights spilled over his shoulders and past his ample chest. Those chests were enormous, cleavage fully exposed. No, he wasn't Jenny Keller, he was Carol Hofstra, aka Crazy Carol, aka the Purple People Eater. The wild goth girl with the huge chest who always dressed in purple and was rumored to be a lesbian. Stunned, he took another drag as the joint circled back, barely noticing the purple lipstick left on the roach. Why, hello Inspector Turtle. What brings you here today? Bunnie sang, holding a toy bear in her right hand, swaying it back and forth as she spoke. Greetings, Dr. Bear, she replied in a deeper voice, waving a plastic turtle in her left hand. I'm here because strange things are happening. Oh, won't you come in for some tea? She said again, moving the bear. And you can tell me all about it. All right, Dr. Bear, but I must warn you, I have the full weight of the law behind me, Bunnie said in the deep tone she used for Inspector Turtle. But I'm just a simple scientist, so don't be afraid, she added, leading the bear and turtle to the far end of her workbench. A plastic tea set sat atop a shoebox, surrounded by 2 doll chairs. Well then, won't you have some tea? She asked, placing the bear and turtle in the chairs and pretending to pour tea from a plastic teapot into the cups. Holding a cup to the turtle's mouth, she continued in the deeper voice, This is excellent tea, Dr. Bear, but I still have questions. Of course, Inspector Turtle, she replied in her normal voice. But please, have a biscuit first. She held a chocolate chip cookie to the turtle's face. Number, excellent biscuit, Dr. Bear. But I still need to ask about Barbie. Oh, you mean this Barbie? Bunnie said, pulling away a towel to reveal an unclothed Barbie doll wearing an egg cup on her head, secured with copper wire. "You monster! What have you done to her?" she said in the turtle's voice. "She's my greatest experiment," Bunnie responded in her lyrical bear voice. "And you will help me finish." "I must stop you," she declared in the deeper tone. "You can't. You've been drugged." "It was the tea, wasn't it?" "No. It was the biscuit. Now it's time for you to become Barbie. You monster." "Moo-wah-ha-ha-ha." Bunnie laughed, firing the T.W.A.T device at Inspector Turtle. "Oh no! I am Barbie now," she exclaimed in a very high voice, moving the doll. "Yes, and now you're my slave," Bunnie added in her Dr. Bear voice. "No, no, no." "Yes. I'll do whatever you say," came the high-pitched reply. "All right, Inspector Turtle, or should I say Barbie? Now, let's get you dressed." "Bunnie!" Deborah shouted from another room. "Are you experimenting again? The television's out." Bunnie glanced anxiously at the tea party she'd set up. She wore a dress and hat borrowed from Deborah's closet, along with gloves and shoes that didn't fit but made her feel grown up. "Yes," she called back quickly. "Just me experimenting." "Well, stop it," Deborah demanded. "I want to watch my shows." "I want to watch my shows," Bunnie mimicked in a high nasal voice. "What was that?" Deborah called. "Nothing," Bunnie replied. Jared sat on the back steps with the Goth kids, staring defiantly as students passed by. People were idiots, especially boys. Every one of them was a liar, an excited poser. She'd learned that fast. After the change, her first instinct was to hide her assets and tone down the goth and purple look. Nobody took her seriously. Normal people treated her like a freak, or assumed she automatically wanted intimacy. She knew she was well endowed, especially for high school. At a large D or small dd, she hoped she'd stopped growing. But she had a brain too. 2 months as Carol Hofstra had helped her start accepting being physically female. 2 menstrual cycles did that, but it wasn't enough to fully embrace being a girl. Not that anyone else at school had trouble labeling her one. The reactions from male classmates and teachers were consistent enough that she began to think of boys as the opposite gender, if not exactly the opposite gender. Perverts, all of them. Not one could hold steady eye contact with her. In response, she decided to own it. Carol's wardrobe made Jared suspect the real Carol Hofstra had come to a similar conclusion. If people were going to treat her like an outsider or a freak, she might as well let them do it on her terms. Besides, she was starting to like purple. She even considered getting another tattoo, her fourth, or rather, the body's fourth and Jared's first. She wanted something to symbolize transformation but still feel goth. Her first idea had been a Death's Head moth, but that was a bit too Silence of the Lambs. Gordon LaCroix walked by, a new blonde on his arm. Jared wasn't sure, but she thought he might have nodded in her direction. "What a phony," one of the goth girls muttered. Jared agreed quietly, but for her own reasons. She was fairly certain Gordon LaCroix was actually the real Carol Hofstra. If that was true, Gordon was a mystery. He hadn't tried to contact Jared and even seemed to avoid her. Jared had wanted to keep in touch with Carol, hoping to switch back, but it had been socially awkward. Over time, they settled into their new cliques with no further contact. Jared sighed with regret. She'd enjoyed being Gordon, money, girls, and a future. It seemed the real Carol was enjoying being Gordon too. The new Gordon was even more of a womanizer than Jared had been. That made sense if the rumors about Carol's orientation were true. If she had been a lesbian, becoming Gordon LaCroix, with girls throwing themselves at her feet, might make her reluctant to switch back. That explained new Gordon, but what about Jared? After 2 months as Carol Hofstra, she was sure one thing: new Carol was no lesbian. She was amazed at how her body responded to male attention. She'd fought it for a long time but recently let a few boys get closer than just looking. Nothing past second base yet, but she wondered what more would feel like. Damn it! If she was stuck as a girl, and it was starting to look that way, then why not go all in? With the right precautions, of course. And it had to be with the right kind of boy, no losers or phonies. Someone who made her laugh, who saw the absurdity of cliques and high school life. Someone who saw her as more than just a great pair of tits. Maybe Eric Warner, she thought, he was cute. Or Kyle Penephile, he was goth, or at least goth-friendly. Of course, Eric hung with a more proper crowd, and his parents were active in the PTA. Kyle, on the other hand, was probably trouble. Rumor had it he was involved with drugs, which was a no-go. Clearly, it was more important to consider the parents' reactions, especially with local elections coming up. The school budget didn't need another scandal. Jared caught herself and wondered, why was she even thinking about school budgets? Happy birthday to you! Happy birthday to you! Happy birthday, dear Bunnie, happy birthday to you! Bunnie stared at the cake before her with mixed feelings. 11 candles flickered, one more year closer to the fate she had planned for Miriam, a year filled with wasted efforts and failed experiments. But it was chocolate, so there was that. Go ahead, Bunnie, Deborah encouraged. Make a wish. Bunnie blew out the candles, silently wishing for a new thermocoupler for her nitrogen input manifold. The small group applauded. Deborah was there, as was Steele and his lawyer. Bunnie had Dr. Bear with her. Inspector Turtle remained restrained at the workbench, awaiting further experimentation. Deborah had insisted Bunnie invite classmates, though Bunnie still wondered why. Here you go, Bunnie, Steele said, handing her a gift. Hope you like it. Bunnie ripped open the wrapping and pulled out a new micrometer relay switch. Oh hey, this is cool, she said. I can really use this. Thanks, Steele. You're welcome, Bunnie, he said with a wide smile. I got you this, sweetie, Deborah added, handing over another gift. Steele helped me pick it out. Bunnie tore through the paper and revealed a new thermocoupler for a nitrogen input manifold. Do you like it? Deborah asked nervously. Bunnie's eyes lit up as she examined it. This is awesome, she exclaimed. Really? Deborah asked. You really like it? It's the best present ever. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Bunnie gushed, wrapping her arms around her foster mother's neck. It's perfect, she added, pressing a kiss to Deborah's cheek. You're welcome, Deborah said, clearly surprised. The rest of the party was brief. Everyone stayed for cake, but Bunnie was too excited about her gifts to socialize for long. Soon, she was back at her workbench, hooking the thermocoupler between her T.W.A.T device and a liquid nitrogen source. A wicked grin spread across her face as she aimed the T.W.A.T at Inspector Turtle, who was restrained with electrical tape. So, Inspector Turtle, she sneered. You thought you had bested me? Learn the folly of defying me. Moo-wah-ha-ha-ha. In the next room, Deborah sighed as her television switched to a blue screen in the middle of 2.5 men. I probably should have predicted this, she muttered to no one. Jared gazed out the window of his office and let out a long sigh. He was still vice principal. A week past graduation, and still vice principal. After everything he'd been through this year, that was progress. He was Mark Mackenzie now. The vice principal. This school depended on him. Sure, he was 34 years old, whereas before he'd been a 17-year-old student. But at least he was male. Not perfect, but workable, especially considering how close he'd been to giving in to feminine urges. Even 4 months later, the thought made him shudder. He'd probably need therapy for years. Thank God for graduation. At least 2 problems were gone. Jared Anderson, the quarterback, had graduated with a football scholarship and was expected to start for state eventually, a shaky prospect for a pro athlete given his breakdown and slow recovery after the switch. Carol Hofstra was gone too, though that was Messier. The old vice principal as Carol had a serious meltdown, and her parents pulled her out of school early. Jared had tried to keep track of her. Last he heard, she was at the local community college, making up credits. All he cared about was that she was far away. That left Gordon LaCroix and Jenny Keller to deal with. Gordon was no problem, he seemed to be enjoying his new life. Jenny was a different story. 7 months on, she was still a moody, depressed mess. Jared dreaded another 3 years of her in his school. He sighed again. Next year would be rough. But if he practiced all summer, maybe he could nail that standing backflip the coach wanted. And if his chest grew like he hoped, he might just make the senior cheerleading squad. It had happened before, he'd be a way better cheerleader than that slut Alicia. Jared's eyes widened as he realized what had been running through his mind. "Why are you here, Bunnie?" Steele asked. They were back at Steele's house, in the TV room. Bunnie sipped from a juice box, tapping her booted toes as she watched cartoons. Deborah had finally gotten her the boots she wanted, the calf-high ones with 3-inch heels, and Bunnie took every chance to admire them. "Just visiting," she said, grabbing another cookie. "Do I need a reason to visit my favorite person, friend, wife?" "Aha," Steele said. "Why are you really here?" "Fine, Mr. Smartypants," Bunnie replied, handing over a bag. "Here. I'm returning your Theta Wave parabolic sensor." Steele eyed the bag suspiciously, pulling out a chunk of circuitry with dangling wires. "What did you do to it?" he asked. "Just a few experiments," she said defensively. "Looks like you were trying to build an asymmetric transference device." "No," Bunnie rolled her eyes. "That would be dumb. Besides, it didn't work." Steele regarded her as if about to ask something, but shook his head instead. "Good thing you weren't," he said. "The results would have been disastrous." "Yeah, disastrous," Bunnie agreed, then paused thoughtfully. "Hypothetically," she began. "Just to see if you agree, what kind of disaster would you expect?" "Well, Bunnie," Steele started carefully, "if you use this to observe someone's thought patterns, you might accidentally cause a body switch." "That's exactly, go on," Bunnie said eagerly. Steele smirked, much to her annoyance. "And if you tried that," he said, "you'd risk hitting an inverse asymptotic attractor every time you encountered the theta wave field." Bunnie considered this. "You'd switch randomly every time the device was triggered," Steele explained. "Exactly what I thought," she exclaimed. "Good thing I didn't do that. I mean, I saw it coming." "Of course, it probably would have gone up in flames the first time you used it," Steele chuckled. "Yeah," Bunnie said, avoiding his gaze. "Good thing I didn't." Steele reached into the bag and pulled out a singed Barbie doll head wired to an egg cup. "That's mine. I need that." Bunnie jumped up to grab it back. Steele leaned back, shaking his head. "So, the only reason you came by was to return my theta wave parabolic sensor?" he asked suspiciously. "Yes," Bunnie said, crossing her arms and tilting her chin. "Really?" Steele pressed. "Absolutely," she replied. "But since you brought it up, I was wondering if you're still using your analog memory recorder." "For what?" Steele asked. "I want to build a working thought capture device," Bunnie said, excitement growing. "I thought I could use it as the main input for a morphic adaptation unit." "So you want to change things into whatever you're thinking about," Steele summarized. "Yes. Exactly. I call it the Modular Optimized Memory Morphic Induction Emitter." Bunnie's eyes sparkled. "MOMMIE?" Steele said incredulously. "You named your machine MOMMIE? You have issues." "I do not." Bunnie snapped, jumping up indignantly. The Barbie head rolled between them, and she scrambled to grab it. "Besides," Steele continued, "wouldn't it be simpler to call it a MAU? Sounds more like a cat noise." It sounds like a cat noise, Bunnie mocked in a high-pitched voice. What? Steele said. So, can I have it? She asked straight-faced. Yes, Steele said reluctantly. But I'm going to regret it. Bunnie squealed. This was going to be amazing, and it was going to work. This time, she was sure. Don't forget to join me on Patreon for exclusive content.